Hi everyone. So the purpose of this tutorial is to go into more depth about CSS and explore some of the properties that you can change to really make your website look a little prettier. What do you need before watching this? Well, you should have completed problem set 8, and it's best if you also completed part 1 of this tutorial. Or if you already know or have the ability to modify the HoosHungry CSS properties, then you should also be okay. If you're a group that's working on a final project, you can also get basic CSS lessons out of this, so you can apply these techniques to any website, not just the HoosHungry site. So with that in mind, let's get started. The first part of this is to make sure that we kind of have our files up and running so we can quickly start to make some changes. In our end result, we want to have something that looks a little like this, but we want to have some sort of words back here, which will look pretty cool. So to set up our interface, we want to make sure we can pull up both our style.css sheet, we got empty right here, and then also our HoosHungry code. And to create this, the first thing we want to do is create a new page. And we'll call this new page title.py. When we're creating this page, and when you're creating any sort of page, it's always a good idea to reuse code from before. It saves time. And so we'll borrow some of the code away from index.py. And it'll help us, follow the correct sort of format. So this first line, we'll definitely want to keep, because that tells the server that this is Python code and that it should be executed in that way. So we'll put that in. The next thing I want to do is we'll also want to import the headers. This is responsible for the print header here, the end header here, and also at the very end, the print footer. And this is great because it sort of allows us to reuse code and not have to type as much HTML. So we want to import the headers, and then we want to call the headers.printheader main, and then we want to close that out with headers. Oh, didn't have to close parentheses. We want to close that out with headers.printFooter or headers.end header first to end that header, and then something. So print, and this is where our custom code will go right here. And at the very end, we'll want to have headers.printFooter. And then here we'll put HoosHungry. So this should give us a very generic sort of standalone web page. So to get to there, we have our link to the HoosHungry. We just go in here and we just type in title.py, and it'll take us straight to our new page. And that's exactly what we sort of did here. If you take a look at the page source, you'll see that it indeed printed the header, printed the footer, and then has a HoosHungry. And so now we'll go to this style page, which is empty right now. So you take a look, still empty, and change some of the properties around. I'm just going to jump right into these. You can Google and use some to Google some of the properties if you don't exactly understand what's going on. But I really want to just do some quick changes to this. So we go here, got our style sheet open, and the first thing we'll do is, and it's always a great idea when you're messing around with CSS to have the website open and have your CSS file open at the same time, so you can quickly see the changes and whether it did what you wanted it to. So the first thing I want to do is clean up. So make the body something standard. And so to do that, we'll just set all the margins equal to 0. And we'll set all the padding, which is inside the margin, equal to 0 as well. And let's put the background color as white. That'll just, give us a clean slate to work with. And there should be a minor change. There we go. So you see it shifted in a little. Next thing we'll want to do is to specify this title background image. And while you can define it in here, it's kind of a good idea to separate it just so you don't change everything else with the rest of the site, because body is a tag that's used very, very often. So we'll call this div title background, and you'll notice that I called it a div. In order to actually have this show up in your HTML code, you have to specify a div somewhere, and that'll take the properties of this. So we'll go ahead and specify a div right here. And you do that by doing this div id equals, and then you put the name here. Title background. Great. And then here we'll close the div. If you open a div, you have to close the div, or your computer will start getting confused. Now we haven't actually changed anything yet. Next thing we want to do is we want to specify this background image. So we'll call it background. And what I did here is I actually just went to Google and I Googled food background. So food background, see that? Enter. And this first one is actually that great looking image. So now we'll copy the image URL for this and paste it in right here. The next thing we'll do is specify some image properties. So no repeat, center, center, fixed. Now let's see what that does to our website. So you can see how you got the very beginning, the inklings of this. That's not good enough. We want to fill the entire page. So the following things will help us fill the entire page. Min height 100%. That specifies the minimum height. Min width 1024 pixels. So no matter how small the screen goes, it'll go that big. And then we want to make a width, just a general width. So if it's 100%, this is kind of just in case. We've got a height of auto, also sort of like a just in case. We want to fix the position. Sometimes the background will scroll with your mouse. We don't want that. And we want it to stay fixed with the top tucked away at 0 and the left also tucked away at 0. So that should make it fill the entire page. And we'll take a look. Looks like yes indeed. So our background now fills the entire page. Now the next thing that we'll try to do is take this and put it in the center. So we specified one div. The next thing we can do is actually specify another div. And we'll call this div center. And just as the first one, we want to name it. Divs are great ways to just create, you're basically creating a little box. Each div is basically kind of like a little box that you can specify the properties. You can change the background color, you can change the lines, you can change anything you want. So to mess around with it, you'll see, let's put the margin top. So let's create the box first. So if we make it a box, a width of 400 pixels and a height of 100 pixels, and let's change the background color to be orange. Let's see exactly where it shows up and how on this website. All right. So it seems that nothing's really showing up. And just thinking back, it's always a great idea to look through and see, okay, so we specified the width and the height, and we set the background color to orange, but nothing's really showing up. Why? This looks fine. So a quick check reveals to me that the problem was we forgot to save the title.py file. So once we created this, we have to make sure we save. And so this is why it's always a great idea to kind of go back and forth. And there we go, it actually shows up. So if you go back and forth, you can kind of check and see the mistakes that you make. Now that doesn't exactly look how we want it to. We kind of want it down a little more. So what we're going to do now is we'll specify the margins. So margin, we want to make a margin left. Auto in the margin. This is a very useful pair of properties. This basically tells it to stay centered. Margin left, margin right. Okay. And then let's bump it down a little. So we'll do a margin top of around, that's roughly 300 pixels. And finally, to kind of round it out, we'll make the font family a little nicer. I'm partial to Helvetica, so I'm going to go ahead and do that as well. And there we go. So you kind of got this new change. So now based on this, we can get rid of. It's great to fill it in so you know exactly what's going on in here. But now that we figured out and got everything looking where we want it to, we can go ahead and remove that orange box. And you'll notice it takes some time when we save for the changes to take effect. So that's why we've got a bit of a lag delay going on. But it does finally show up. The next thing we want to do is change this font size a little. It's a little small. So to do that, we do have to go back to our title page. And we'll just wrap this around an H2. And H2, this is one of those things that is one of those standard properties that you can change. That's why it's not a div. So similar to the body tag, it doesn't require a number sign behind it. And so that should make the text a little bit bigger. There we go. But what if we wanted it even bigger? Now see, this is where we can customize our tag. So if we go like this, h2, just like the body, since it's an already created used tag, we'll just do a specify font size, and we'll make it 45 pixels, which should be a bigger. And we've got that delay again, but it works out now. And this is one thing. It's always kind of a good idea. In this case, we're not using too much of this, but too much of the Python. But if, when possible, you can sort of do your developing on your own desktop, that makes it so you don't have that kind of delay issue. So now we create that. Let's do the last bit to this. Let's add a little button so that we can get from this page to another page. And this is what we'll specify our last div. So we'll call this one enter. And I'll just go through the code really quickly. 75. I don't recommend doing it this way. You want to kind of do one property at a time. Specify a padding of 2 pixels. And so let's go into padding at this moment. So margins show how much. So if this was a div, a margin of 2 on this side right here, where my mouse is, would shift it this way, and then maybe a margin of 2 up here would shift it this way. On the contrary, if I want to add padding, padding would make this sort of window bigger by 2. So say I wanted to add a padding, it would make a 2 here, and then if I want to add padding on this side, it would kind of have an effect like this, so there'd be 2 white spaces. So you kind of think of it as padding as the increasing the width on the inside, and margin as on the outside. So we want to make the width on the inside a little big for this, so that there's some room between text and the wall. We'll make the margin right. Let's make it float to the right, so margin right. And this becomes prettier when we float it all the way to the actually, yeah, when we float it to the right. And then let's align the text in the center. Let's give it a background color of black, so it shows up. And let's make the font weight. This is how you can make something bold like that. I'm gonna go ahead and close that. So nothing will happen until we add it in. So if we go over here, we want to make sure that we add this button in, and this time it'll go under the h2. So div id equals enter. Close div. And let's put a text in here. It says enter. So we've saved that. Let's see if we can get it to show up. And there we go, right there. Now, unfortunately, the text is completely illegible. That's because we set the background color to black. We can use hexadecimal to choose a different background. So AFD775 is basically a lightish sort of green. And that shows up perfectly right there. Now we'll notice, so this is like kind of the things you want to do. It's not centered, but we said right here that we want a text align center. Well, we see that we actually typed a type O, and this allows us to kind of catch our own errors. And so if we wait for the lag time to kick in, this should actually show us a nice. So this shows us a nicely centered page right there. Finally, let's say we want to add a little information line in here. That doesn't require any CSS. We can just go in here and we can just go in here and type, okay, the greatest culinary website ever, period. Save that. And we can see that if we just do that, it'll show up right there. And one final change. So this enter sign doesn't really lead anywhere. So let's make it lead to our main page. So our URL here, copy that, and you want to make it the ahref specifies the link. So you just put that link in right there, and let's change this to index.py because that's where we want to go. And it's still called enter, and then we close that A. And so that should make it into a link that'll point us right to our main index page. So if we refresh it, sure enough, it's now a link, and click, it takes us to our main HoosHungry page.